Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webinar with the CASW. We are so happy that you're here and joining us today. This webinar today is titled Personal and Professional Strategies to Reduce Psychological Stress During a Pandemic. My name is Alexandra Zanis, and I am the Social Policy and Communications Coordinator here at the CASW. Hello, I'm so happy to be joining you today and to be here in Ottawa and seeing everyone from across the country. I wanted to take a quick moment to thank everyone who is joining us today from wherever you are, wherever you're at. I know many of you are adapting to unconventional ways of practice while also trying to address your own personal health and well-being. So I hope today provides a little bit of clarity and direction for you all, and that we can have some engaging and lively discussion with our incredible webinar presenter. So as always, before I introduce our amazing webinar presenter, I'll just briefly cover some of our housekeeping notes for anyone new that might be joining us, or for those who maybe just need a little bit of a refresher. So just know that our entire platform is completely customizable, meaning that you can make any of the screens bigger or larger, and you can really set it up for your own personal viewing needs and what you want to see from the presentation. So please just take a minute and rearrange everything around, maybe make our spaces bigger or smaller, the slides bigger or smaller, whatever works best for you. Also want to let you know that the certificate of attendance is available at the bottom. It's the little yellow widget, and it should be open for anyone who views about 40 minutes if you need one of those, so just a heads up. Please also engage with us in the question and answer box. You can engage throughout the presentation and put little notes anywhere you want, and we will compile them for a formal question and answer period at the end. You can also engage with us on Twitter with any comments you have, and we'd love to see that happen at CASW_ACTS. Or as well in the resource section. So yeah, this presentation has an unprecedented amount of people. We have a lot of people on this presentation, so I'm so sorry if we don't get to your question right away, but know that we are seeing them and taking note and appreciate you being here. I also wanted to make a quick note that CSW has launched a Facebook peer-to-peer support group for any practicing clinicians or any social workers out there who want to share their resources and their expertise with others and are looking for maybe just a bit of an online community to share thoughts and ideas and stories and expertise. That's also in the resource section for you to request to be a member if you so choose. All right. Now, onto our incredible presenter. We're so lucky to have a CISW veteran webinar presenter, Charlene Richards. She's been with us a couple times before, so we're happy to welcome her back. Charlene is a registered social worker from my hometown in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and she specializes in trauma-informed practice and burnout prevention for personal and professional caregivers. She's the founder of Caring Society, a certified educational institute in Canada, providing education and training to individuals and organizations. Charlene is also an instructor with the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Calgary and the author of 20 Quick Strategies to Help Your Patients and Clients Manage Stress. Welcome back, Charlene. I am so excited to have you right now.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Every time that I've presented webinars with this group, it's always been a great experience, lots of discussion. So I'm looking forward to another good interaction. So yes, thank you for that lovely introduction as well. So most of this has already been discussed. Just want to add two things to that. The primary theoretical orientations that I've been trained in and tend to use include cognitive behavioral theory, solution-focused, mindfulness-based interventions, positive psychology, and behavioral health sciences. So you'll see that flavor throughout the presentation. And also just wanted to note that because we will be talking about some of the factors that are connected to working from home and working in different formats as opposed to the traditional face-to-face, just want to note that I've been working back and forth between private practice and public mental health since 2008. So I've many, many years of working from home offices and have also been working, my private practice has been online since 2013. So I've been doing that quite a bit as well and teaching at the university online. So a lot of these sort of stressors that people are experiencing, I completely understand that whole learning process of making those adjustments. Today, we will be talking about individual and relational strategies for psychological health and wellness. We will go over a framework for looking at trauma-informed social work when we're looking at that from a distance or when we're looking at large-scale societal change, which is exactly what is happening with this pandemic. And we'll identify some strategies to practice social work in a new format for those of you who are working from home or working from phone or video. So a couple of questions, just because it's always nice to get to know who is out there in the audience. So the first question being, how long have you been in social work? I know we have some students, some people who are newer to the field, and then we have people with some longer term experiences. So although I've presented for CASW before, this is a new platform. So as I click this button, I am hoping the poll will pop up. Did that go? Yeah, perfect. There we go. So how long have you been in social work? Student, less than 2 years, 2 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, or more than 10 years? And I'll give you a moment to enter that, and then we'll look at the results. If I were checking this off, I would be checking the 10 plus years.
And I'd be checking the 2 to 5. Oh, I will.
Excellent.
Very exciting.
All right. So let's see. Oh, wow. So half of the people here have been in practice for 10 plus years. That's wild. And then sort of an equal range between 2 to 10 years and some students. All right. The next question is, just want to get a sense of what field you're practicing social work in. Is it mental health and addictions? Is it child protection or domestic violence work, medical social work, community programs, gerontology, or other fields? And I'll give you a moment to look at that. I just realized I didn't put education in, but that could also be in other. My primary background has been working with adults in mental health and addictions, so concurrent disorders for many, many years.
Also seeing some people saying housing and advocacy. We didn't include that, so that's amazing as well. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, when I put community programs, I was really thinking of all the programs that help people within the community and access resources, and there's, yeah, so many, but the housing first. Incredibly important programming. All right, let's see our results. Okay, so, and the others, so yeah, so we're hearing housing, and then do we have any others? People have been identifying any others?
I am seeing some people saying at a school setting, medical social worker, financial empowerment, mental health and addictions and forensics, working with immigrants, children, and youth, community home care, post-secondary mental health. Very cool. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I think what the sort of the common experiences with the people who social workers work with is that the majority of the time they are a vulnerable population and more likely to be at risk. And so regardless of which setting we're in, that's often the population that social workers are brought in to work with, which means these times when we're looking at such disruption and such change and trauma and grief, the people we're working with have even greater needs. We will begin with personal individual strategies. I wanted to talk a little bit about mindset because it can be incredibly powerful and it can be reflected on and adjusted many times throughout the day. And one of the things that can be helpful is whenever we're looking at a period of transition which means there's change happening, is to label it as a transition. And sometimes the change is coming up and it's so quick and it's so intense that we feel like it's going to be like this long term, and we feel like it's, there's sort of no ending in sight. And that can cause a lot of distress if we're sort of magnifying and projecting it into the future. So one of the taglines that I use, I've even had to post it before during periods of change, is just for now, not forever. And so that helps us remember that this isn't always going to be this way. There will be change. One of the things that I'm seeing happen with a lot of people during this experience is something that happens often with chronic pain or an injury that leads to chronic pain, which is a comparison of our current abilities and experiences to our previous abilities and experiences. So there's sort of this before and after. So if somebody develops a chronic condition or they have an injury and they can't do what they used to do, there's the before period and the after period. For us, we're looking at primarily in North America, we're looking at the sort of time that the pandemic came and then the restrictions that started happening in terms of space and the way that we work with people. So there's a before and an after. If we spend a lot of time comparing and wishing we had what we had before, that is going to lead to stress. If we recognize that we're in a different situation with different abilities and different experiences, and we recognize it as transitional, that can help in terms of focusing on the here and now and moving forward. Another mindset that I'm seeing a lot of is focus on scarcity. And so whether that is scarcity of, I don't want to say material items, but consumer goods, toilet paper being one of the sort of big ones. If we are focusing on what we don't have, then that is going to be causing us stress, as opposed to can we see what do we have an abundance of? And the abundance could be freedom in our homes, freedom in our yards, our balconies. Do we have sort of freedom to access people through technology? Do we have abundance of sort of connection that we can make with people through video or through phone? So in stressful periods like this, the brain is going to look for the potential dangers. We've evolved because our brain has looked for potential dangers and tried to figure out ways to avoid them or to cope with them. And this situation is no different, where there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of danger out there. We're often focusing on the potential dangers, which can also include the scarcity. And we want to purposely shift into abundance, into what we do have in the present moment. This brings us to some should statements around the situation. This is my CBT very much kicking in. So in the Caring Safely member group, I've been increasing the number of live sessions that I've been having with our members during this time. And the theme was that a lot of people who are no longer going into the office and are potentially working from home, there was this belief that I should have a lot of time to get this, and this done. I'll do my laundry regularly throughout the week. There'll be lots of time for me to keep the house clean. I can learn a new language. I should be doing something. I should be trying something. I should take advantage of this opportunity. And we'll talk a little bit more around why those aren't necessarily accurate during a period of time like this. So anytime you feel the should statements coming on, our cheesy little therapist line is quit shitting all over yourself, quit shitting all over other people. So watching for the shoulds. Next to that is for those of you who are perfectionists. Does anybody identify out there as perfectionists, like to try and get things perfect? I think a lot of people in our field do. Recognizing that done is better than perfect. So trying to sort of embrace our imperfections during this period of time. This is actually a really good time to try something and embrace our imperfections, because everybody is understanding that everyone is on a learning curve right now and nothing is sort of at our regular level of production and what we used to be able to do. And then bringing in some of our really core social work theory in terms of systems theories, recognizing that, systems, whether it's us, our core family, us and our extended family, our peers, our coworkers, our organizations, society, when we get into larger systems, they're all incredibly resilient and we adapt. We adapt very quickly, and we're always striving for that balance. So, I think when we were first talking about doing this webinar about a week and a half ago, it was when the social distancing restrictions were just coming in and a lot of organizations were shutting down. And I actually had an MSW class that night, and we were talking about the disruption. And I was mentioning that the disruption at that point, it was not over. There was still large-scale disruption happening every single day. We're about a week and a half into it, and the disruptions are still happening, but they're not happening as often. And our systems, you can see, we're already starting to balance. We're finding new ways to do things, new ways to connect, how to do online shopping. So our systems are adapting, and they're going to continue to adapt. It was that initial sort of hurdle of getting over that incredible disruption at the beginning. In terms of our exposure to trauma, so we want to limit that, and we want to try and limit the impacts of it. So when it comes to trauma in the news, if this was not an issue like a global pandemic, my recommendation is to always limit our exposure to the news and the trauma in the news. because of the amount of change that's happening, we actually have to stay informed. So we need to know what is going on. One of the strategies I've talked about with people is finding a news partner, and you and your partner each identify what you need to know from the news. So it could be regional in terms of your city, your province, your country, your organization, the field that you're in, and you know what you need to know. And there might be a couple of other statistics or factors that you want to know that are important to you or extended family. And then you find the same thing for your news buddy. And each day you take turns checking the news and reporting that information back to the other person. So you get a 24-hour period of detox, but you still hear from them the important information that you need. And then you're the one who's checking and they get a 24-hour detox. And that 24 hours in this time of what's happening can be incredibly nourishing to just pull away from social media and the news for those 24 hours. In terms of limiting exposure to trauma, if we're still working with our peers, our colleagues, if we're still debriefing, trying to limit the graphic details of the trauma, we can talk about what we are doing in terms of our work and we can get feedback and support without giving those graphic details. Moving our body. So if we're exposed to trauma, our stress response is likely getting triggered. We know that we want to move our body, get the heart rate going, try and reduce some of that stress. Peloton, if you've never heard of them, they have these incredibly expensive yet amazing treadmills and bikes, and they have these live online classes that people can connect with. So even if you don't have a piece of their equipment, they've opened up their online app for 90 days, and they have so many amazing different classes on there. So all different types, all different periods of time. So perhaps taking advantage of something like that. And then again, because the news is going to tell us about the trauma and the negative things that are happening, we need to intentionally look for good news in the media. Is anybody a fan of The Office? Was anybody a fan of The Office? I loved that show. And yesterday was the 15-year anniversary of the very first episode of it. So John Krasinski, who is Jim from The Office, he started a TV or a YouTube channel in his house called Some Good News. And I have the link to it there, and you have them in your resources. Fantastic. The first episode is 15 minutes. It's him producing it. There's a little surprise in there in terms of a guest presenter as well. But such an amazing concept in that he's bringing together good news stories. And so he had put out sort of a tweet and a message asking for stories, and people sent it in, and he's compiling it together and sharing it. And a lot of it in the beginning was about healthcare providers as well. So that was great. And then also the Good News Network has been around for a long time, and there are lots of other places that are purposely focusing on good news. So really important to make sure that we're getting that in as well to try and prevent some of the vicarious trauma, some of the shift in our worldview. If the only thing we're reading is the trauma and the suffering and the negative things that are happening between humans, that's what it's going to start shifting how we view things. And when our strong emotions come up, because they will at some point, we want to be able to identify the emotion, label the emotion, just acknowledge that it's there. It's okay for us to feel overwhelmed, scared, sad, frustrated. All of these are emotions that are going to take place with grief. And we all are experiencing large-scale trauma and grief in this situation. And so recognizing that, and it may be already happening for you, it may happen in the future, it may seem like it's coming out of nowhere. One of the strategies that can be helpful, particularly if the emotion is arousal based in the sense of there being agitation, anxiety, fear, is to do a technique where you journal with relaxation. So you'll spend 2 minutes free writing, just writing whatever thoughts are going through your mind. You'll set a timer on your phone or a device, and then you'll pause after 2 minutes and you'll do 2 minutes of relaxation. You really, truly want to trigger the relaxation response here. A couple years ago, I did a webinar for CASW on preventing compassion fatigue, and I went through a whole strategy on how to make sure you're triggering the sympathetic or parasympathetic branch of your nervous system. Or progressive muscle relaxation. And then you'll go back and forth. You'll go back to 2 minutes of free writing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and then you'll go back to 2 minutes of progressive muscle relaxation. And it actually helps you process what you're thinking and feeling so much more quickly than if you just let your mind take off with it. And then it's like a tornado of thoughts and emotions happening that just keep ramping up. Sensory grounding, I'm sure most social workers are familiar with that. I also went over those strategies in the previous webinar. Gratitude. So gratitude is incredibly powerful. There's people that I'm working with, other educators and trainers, who are feeling like reflecting on gratitude seems very simple, or seems like it's something that it could make people angry to recommend gratitude in this kind of situation. What we know is that gratitude is going to be very powerful in terms of what you're thinking and what you're feeling in any situation. And so whether you write a list of things that you're grateful for, or you just look around and have a moment of gratitude, I talk with people about keeping folders on their phone that have pictures of things or people or places that they're grateful for. And then connecting with someone. So human connection is going to be incredibly important during this, an incredibly important protective factor. All right, so for our audience, who are you currently living with? And I'm going to put that up. Are you living alone? Are you living with a partner, children? Do you have partner and children? Do you have partner and children and extended family? Or do you have other? I'll just give you a moment there, and then we will look at the results. All right, so the majority of people are with partner or with partner and children. All right, so that is really important when we're looking at some of the relational strategies. So it's possible that people think that this is how their days should be looking. And there are even likely people on social media who are putting pictures up and saying that this is what the days are looking like. My hunch is that for most people, we're seeing a bit more of this sprinkled in. We're seeing the homeschooling, relationship issues coming up in terms of parenting, marital conflicts. I have a sort of unique group of friends. So on social media, they're showing the realities of what's going on in the house, and they're just sort of being very humble about, yeah, is this what your house looks like? So the reality is we are going to have more of these experiences than having the perfect sort of house and family and relationship. So in terms of marital relationships, when we're stressed, it can lead to a focus of what is not working, so what's not working well. And it's very easy for us to pick out things that we are unhappy about. We can focus on them, ruminate about them, run them through in our head until they become more magnified. We feel more intensity of them. We need to purposely look for the good in terms of our partner. And so this might mean writing a list. This might mean writing a list and looking at it often, taking a picture of your list, keeping it on your phone, keeping just a list written on your phone, pictures of good times. We were not designed to live with our spouse 24 hours a day, all the way back from hunting and gathering. We did not spend 24 hours a day together indefinitely. When I was in public health, anytime I was working with someone who was at the retirement stage and they were experiencing issues with mental health, we always looked at the impact of their sudden, significant amount of time together with their partners, and the fact that when we are suddenly together with our partners that often, we almost have to learn an entire new way of being in that relationship and communicating. And so communicating being really important, talking about what's working, what isn't working. Nobody has experience with this, what's happening here, being in isolation, all the fear and worry of what's happening out there. And so if we can look at communicating and talking about experiments. So let's just experiment with this strategy today. It might be in terms of parenting. Let's experiment with this strategy. It might be in terms of responsibility or work. And just checking in regularly so that you can adapt or try your new strategies. Ask each other what you need and recognize that it might change from day to day. Don't assume we know what the other person wants. Don't assume they know what we want. We need to be incredibly clear in terms of what we want and what we need. And we might not even know what we want and what we need. We might say, let me try this, and then see if they can, if we can work it out that way. Ideally, we can still have some alone time to focus on each other. So I'm hearing a lot of people saying that they're flexing their work day so that they're with the kids during the day and then they're doing more work at night and then going to bed, trying to make sure that there's still some of that time for the relationship. And then allow for solitary enjoyment, particularly for our introverts out there. As an introvert, I need a bubble space to have a little bit of that solitary space. Now, that could be in a room, in the car, in the yard, on the balcony. Recognize that it's okay for you or your partner or any of your children to need a little bit of solitary enjoyment time, and figure out how to make that happen within your space. The Atlantic wrote a great article, How Not to Tank Your Relationship. So I just put a link up there because they have so many good things to look at about that. So if you're looking for some more information there. The family problem-solving model. What I tend to see, I'm going to admit, I primarily work with females and moms. And so in situations like where there's a change or where there's stress, it's often one parent who sort of takes on that problem-solving role. They feel like they need to sort of coordinate and organize everything and figure out a solution. And they're the person that everyone goes to with their problems. And so that can be a lot to carry in general life. That is a significant amount to carry when everybody is in the house dealing with these dynamics. So there's a great problem-solving model that a friend of mine who's a child psychologist taught me. And I was going to go through sort of a story with the example. I might briefly, we have just a little bit of time for that. But what it is when there's an issue in the house, pause and think, is this a me problem or is this a family problem? And if it's a you problem, you're the only one who can sort of address it and control it and identify what needs to be changed. If other people have needs that need to be addressed and can control the impact of the situation, then we're looking at a family problem. It's the same thing for a relationship as well. Is this a me problem or a relationship problem? And so if it's a family problem, what we want to do is shift into the family problem solving model. So we want to identify what the problem is and write out a shared understanding of it. And this is great with kids because my friend did it with her kids. And the issue was they were sort of picky eaters is the term that she would use. So I'm comfortable using that. And it got to the point where she was sometimes making a third breakfast in the morning. She'd make one breakfast, they didn't really like it. She'd make a second one, they didn't like it. And when it got to the third breakfast, she thought, this is not going to continue on. So this is a family problem, we need to address it. So they spent some time talking about what this problem is. And the kids were even doing sort of art and drawing and getting right into it. And then once they had sort of a shared understanding, the problem is that breakfast time, coming up with breakfast meals that everybody would be happy with. And so then they wrote down possible solutions, and everybody can write every single possible solution. Her one daughter, so the problem being she didn't like what was happening for breakfast, her possible solution was to go to boarding school, which I just thought was hilarious. She doesn't know anyone who's been to boarding school. They don't know anyone who's been to boarding school. So the fact that that was her solution, that's fine. That can still also go on the possible solutions. Once those solutions are out there, sort of reviewing all of them and then picking one solution that everyone agrees to try for a set period of time. So again, experiments make things easier because it's, let's just try it once. Let's try it a second time. Does it work? So then we move into step 4. We review the solution. So is it working? Do we want to keep it? Do we need to adapt it? Or do we want to let it go and change it completely? And so what they had done, in terms of breakfast, they came up with the fact that the girls would, for 1 week, the girls would choose from either oatmeal or yogurt bowl with new toppings and build their own breakfast bowl. So this ended up becoming sort of a, let's go shopping together. Let's, as a family, let's plan for it for the next week. They're now in part of the solution, and it ended up being a success for them. And they continued to add to their menu options each week. So this was no longer mom trying to meet their needs every morning. This was them coming up with part of the solution. So really great way for, or it could be dad, any parenting figure, caregiving figure, whenever there's sort of a group problem, to look at who's all involved to start problem solving that. All right, and so in terms of our audience, has your work changed from face-to-face to another format? So is phone new to you? Is video new to you? Are both of them new to you? I was going to use the term telehealth. Telehealth is it's a really popular term in the US, even for people who are talking about video. So I always have to get clarification when they're saying telehealth, because to me, telehealth is telephone, and video is a bit different. So maybe our organizations are also using telehealth. All right, so let's see the results here. Hasn't changed. We have some more phone. 50% both phone and video. All right, and that's new. Yeah, the learning curve for people in terms of video, some of the funny things that have happened for people who don't know that their camera's on and that their microphone is on in terms of meetings and whatnot has had some chuckles over the past couple of weeks. I think most people are recognizing when you need to click mute and when your camera is on. I think in terms of the different type of work that we're doing, it's important to just review the 6 key principles of a trauma-informed approach. And so this comes from Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration in the US. And the 6 key principles: safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, and cultural, historical, and gender issues. When we're working in general, we often are bringing these principles into the type of work that we're doing. It's very much aligned with social work values, social work theories that we use. And even when we have a perfect system in place before any of this, we were still doing ongoing work to try and incorporate these principles. We might not have had all of them incorporated well. There were areas that we were trying to build on. Now with this change that's happening, we might feel like we're not getting a lot of this into our work. And so remembering that systems are adapting. As social workers, if we might be the only social worker on a team, or we might be full social workers, but it's important for us to, in the discussions about how our services are changing, how we're supporting people, to remember and advocate to bring up these issues. I've heard from a lot of social workers already who, when they are the only social worker in the field, they're helping other fields understand what their clients need from this type of perspective. And so in terms of safety, we'll talk about a strategy for that for phone and video work. I think trustworthiness and transparency, one way that we want to sort of bring that in when we're working with people is just to label the transition and the change, and that letting people know that the information we're giving now can change to the best of our ability. This is what it is now. We don't know if it's going to change in the future. And so trying to help the people we're working with recognize that this is a fluid period and there are changes, so that they can continue to trust us and see that we are being transparent as well in terms of being in this similar situation of change. Trying to be mindful of what different peer support programs people do have access to. I know that internet access isn't something that everyone has access to. For those who do, we can see things like Smart Recovery, AA meetings, different support programs showing up online. So trying to become knowledgeable of what alternative sources of peer support there are for the people that we are working with. So collaboration, when we're working with people in this situation, we may be beginning with, okay, these are some things that we have to discuss during our session together. What is it that you want to discuss? So really have them being part of designing your sessions together, because things are going to be so different for them as well. And so really sort of empowering people to identify their needs, to advocate for their needs in ways that are safe for them. And recognizing that, with certain cultures, with certain populations, these restrictions, this level of collective trauma may not be the first time that they're experiencing it. There may be a history of this. And so recognizing things like gender issues, there are already a lot of people talking about the increase in risk for domestic violence. So depending on the people we're working with in the fields that we're in, we want to review these principles and look at how we can start bringing them into the new type of work that we are doing. And recognizing that during a period of change, we're not going to have the same level of sort of services and supports with these principles already in place. We're looking to continuously add them. Okay, so our audience, who is working from home? Yes, no, sometimes. Maybe I didn't push that one through. Or maybe I just have to give it a few more seconds before I go to the answer.
It's actually, you're going to have to, sorry, Charlene, you're going to have to go backwards from this result page. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Are you working from home? Yes, 40%, no, 51% sometimes. Okay, so we're almost half and half in terms of who's at home and who's still going out. Okay, so working from home, some tips for working from home. Finding a space. And so I've seen some people in terms of social media are sort of laughing at the recommendations around the type of space that they should be finding. I think the bare minimum that we're looking for in the beginning is trying to find somewhere that we can close the door for privacy and has a strong internet connection. I put this picture of a closet in, a messy closet in. I actually, in public health, once worked in a closet. It's sometimes, the spaces that we get put into when we're going out and working in different settings is out of our control. And so I say that because even in sort of a closet area, again, not ideal, but how can we adapt it and try and make it okay for just this period of time? And so whether that means if we have a small space somewhere where we can pack away some stuff and put it in the garage or the attic or the storage or anywhere, so that we can carve out a very small area at minimum for us to be able to do our work. Ideally, it has a door so that we can set the boundaries around when we're working and creating a sign that says in session when we are in session. I heard one of our care and safety members had gone to a webinar about working from home, and it had more so to do with working from home when you have children. And one of the recommendations from there was to create a sign for your children to let them know sort of the different stages of where you're at in work and what's okay. So they can come in and talk to you. It might be one stage you might feel like in terms of the work you're doing, they can come in. They might be able to come in and be in the space that you're in, but not necessarily sort of talk to you and engage with you. And I know that's very age dependent in terms of what can be done there. And then they can only come in if it's urgent, which is likely when we're sort of in session. But this way you can still set boundaries and sort of have that level of privacy and help them determine when it's okay and when it sort of isn't okay or what they can do. Try to maintain a routine and schedule. I think one of the first things that happens when people are working from home is there's this belief of, I have so much time now. I don't have to commute. So much time. I can work in whatever I want. I don't have to shower until later. It really does make a difference if you still get up, get dressed, even putting on work clothes. A lot of people are doing top half work clothes. I'm not going to lie, since I'm online, I wear yoga pants most days, but I'm always sort of dressed from the top up. And so they're nice yoga pants. One of the other things that can be helpful is to consider a peer check-in. So if you're really struggling with this structured routine, if you have a peer that you can set to meet, so to speak, it means you have to get to your place of work within the house at a period of time. And you want to sort of put a compartmentalization on it, 10 minutes tops, 5 minutes each. What are you looking at in your schedule today? Just sort of having that connection. And then you might do the same thing at the end of the day as a checkout as well. You do not have more time because you're working from home. One of the things that people are finding is the more you're at home, the messier it is. It's just the nature of having to cook your meals at home, being at home more often. Everything needs to be cleaned more often. Also, if we're switching the type of work that we're doing, the learning curve in terms of the technology often takes a lot of that time away as well. Even grocery shopping, people are spending significant amount of time just trying to get a pickup time for different large superstores that we can do. So, we're now spending time online shopping. Just so many different things are happening that just because you're home doesn't mean that you have a lot more time. Also thinking, if you're going to do the structured time at home, what would you leave the house in terms of laundry and cleanliness if you had to leave for work? So let's say you run out the door at 7:30 every morning and you look back and you see things that you could clean, but you say, no, I've got to go because I have to get to work. You want to try and keep that same frame of mind with you so that you can sort of separate what your work time is from your home time. Some people have the flexibility to work during the day and during the evening, and so people will think, well, I'll take a bit of time now and I'll make up for it later. I would highly recommend you track how much time you take off for your personal activities, because it will be significantly more than you think it is. And then you'll start to wonder, why do I have to spend so much time in the evening, or why am I falling behind in terms of work? And so even if you're just tracking your time, I like to use I bought an app for $4.99 called Be Focused Pro, and you can actually download it onto your computer or your phone, and you can set your different goal, and it will just have a timer going on there. The act of having a timer counting down gives you that sense of urgency to stay on track. And it also reminds you of how long you've been doing something. So whether it's something for work or something personally, or if you're doing it in terms of limiting your access to certain news or media, that can be very helpful. If you're doing phone or video sessions, so I strongly avoid scheduling back-to-back sessions. I booked my public mental health and face-to-face work completely different from online work, especially with new people in the beginning, new people who haven't used the telehealth, and when new technology was for us. It takes more time for troubleshooting. You want to give yourself more time between sessions and meetings so that you've got the ability to get up and walk around. When we're out in clinic or face-to-face, we have to get up and go and get the person and bring them back into our office, or we have to go to a session somewhere. When we're working online, you could literally sit in your seat and not move, because everybody's coming to you through video. And it's going to be important for you to take that time in between sessions, move around, walk, stretch, squats, count your steps, check your ergonomics if you're going to be sitting there for an extended period of time. Sound is more important than video. Get a headset that's compatible with your computer, hook it up and test it out with your video software first. Have a backup one. So I got these Bluetooth, but I've got the good old plug-in that is always ready to go afterwards. Zoom may allow you to choose a different background. It depends on the person who's setting up the meeting. So if you are in that closet and you don't want people to see the background, then you can choose a different background there. You can improve your video by closing other programs. So pause any programs that are syncing, your Google Drive, your Dropbox, any programs that are constantly syncing. Pause those while you're live streaming. Limit other live streaming on your network, so other people shouldn't be gaming or doing heavy downloads. Give these tips to clients too. Try and be near your router. Test your speed. So I put a link into speed test for Shaw. They'll tell you what your speed is. You might be able to go around the house and find different areas where your wireless is better, or even consider wired internet if your wireless is poor. Before we switched providers, I had wired internet, but then we switched providers and could jack it up significantly. So could let that go. In terms of safety, so when you are doing telehealth, keep in mind that at any moment you could lose contact with the person that you are talking with, and you may not be able to get them back. So your process should be different, and you should talk about the process of it with the people that you are connecting with. So thinking, if you're doing video, the first thing you want to do is confirm a phone number for them if you have access to that in case the internet drops. You want to talk about the process as soon as you begin the session. So let's say you're starting with Zoom. If Zoom fails, I don't recommend going to a second video platform. I know some people have different options. If one form of video fails, I recommend going straight to phone and then potentially trying the other one the next time, because then you're losing so much time and there can be frustration. Make sure you have the emergency contact information for the client. If they're far away in a different area, you want to have the local emergency resources for them, and you want to confirm their personal emergency contact. And this is something I will even write on paper. I won't put their names or identifying information, but I will have that on paper, because if something happens to your computer or the internet and you can't get into a cloud to get that information, you want to be able to have that piece of paper and your phone to be able to make those connections. And then also at the beginning, because what often happens in a face-to-face session is before we finish, we make sure that people have grounded, that they're feeling safe in terms of safety and stabilization. We might even be talking about what they're going to do after the session, who they're going to connect with. These are things that we want to talk about at the beginning of the session and our time together, in case something were to happen and you were to lose contact with them while there was distress. You want to know that they already have a plan in terms of how they're going to get support and what strategies they're going to do for themselves. Final thoughts, and we're getting just to question time. So final thoughts are that we all are experiencing collective trauma and grief. You may feel it now, you may feel it later. It might feel like it pops up out of the blue. It might be waves of feeling like crying, feeling sort of fear. All of that is okay. our trauma and grief is not meant to be compared. So because somebody else is experiencing maybe greater losses, or in terms of the numbers of losses, we don't want to ignore our own pain. Us ignoring our own pain does not help other people grieve, does not help them with their trauma. In fact, us identifying ours, experiencing it, processing, healing from it is going to help us engage in sustainable caring so that we can be here for the long haul. You don't want to get into sort of black and white thinking where you're trying to white knuckle it through a period of time that we don't know what that period of time is. So we want to try and do that sustainable caring while we are doing this work. And just remembering that humans are incredibly resilient. We adapt, we try to find balance. Post-traumatic growth, vicarious post-traumatic growth, incredible concepts and experiences that happen all the time and are already happening, and we may not be able to see it now, but it is going to continue to happen. There's going to be significant growth that happens in many people, in many places, in many ways that we haven't seen yet. Okay, so there we go. We made it within our time. Wow. We are open for questions.
That is amazing. Thank you. I feel a little bit more grounded. I loved what you had to say about the speed test at home. That's a brilliant idea because I'm always lagging on my videos and stuff. Okay. Anyway, I loved a lot of the things, but that was one that I definitely picked up on. So, of course, we have a ton of questions. I'm going to try and get through all of them if we can. To start off, one of the things that one of our presenters earlier in the presentation was saying was, I work with young children and have limitations with online formats. I can only do short sessions and mostly work with parents. Do you have any tips or tricks?
So this is where I think working with the parents is going to be incredibly important, because it's, when we're over phone, when we're over video, we don't have that same connection with youth. And so one of the things that I talk about in terms of sort of parenting strategies is for parents to practice the strategies as well. So we're teaching strategies and tips to parents, and then we're also teaching age-appropriate versions of that, so you can practice on the phone with the parent and they can practice with the child. And so because you're not there face to face, so much of what's happening with the child is coming from the parent. So in those short periods of time, it could be identifying different strategies and ways to sort of address that. The other thing that I've done before, and I've never worked with children online, so just want to be clear about that, is sometimes sort of looking at the family problem solving model, but looking at it in general with youth. So if there's the ability to have, if it's safe to have parent and child together on the session, and really just talking about process and saying, when this issue comes up, what do you think might be helpful? And children are actually, they have a lot of information in terms of things that they would like to see happen when things are going well. And sometimes when we facilitate that conversation with parents and children together, and we make it safe and open to talk about, sometimes they can come up with sort of their sort of plans and strategies together. So it might be a bit more of facilitating processes within the home as opposed to trying to make those happen outside of the home, all within, of course, sort of age appropriateness, safety, parent skill.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Do you have any thoughts about this person's calling it toxic positivity? People also need to know that it's okay to not be okay. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and I'll use it in my correct language as opposed to what I would normally say is, as humans, we're designed to feel a full range of emotions. We will have good emotions. We will have unpleasant emotions. We need to have that full range, and we need to acknowledge them and experience them. So even when I'm doing cognitive behavioral therapy with people and we're looking at identifying the distorted thinking pattern and we're looking at alternatives, the alternative is never ignoring the unpleasant experience that's happening. We can always recognize that this is difficult, this is unpleasant, this doesn't feel good, and we're allowed to have that happen. I talk about in Caring Safely a pity party for one, so that we are allowed to have periods of time where we just want to go and feel bad about what we are experiencing. The thing is, we want to compartmentalize that. It's something that we give a certain period of time to. Maybe it's an hour, 3 hours, one evening. And we want to make sure that we have a plan to come back and take action for that. But we do need to give ourselves the ability to feel those emotions. If we feel like we might get overwhelmed by letting ourselves go into those emotions, the journaling with the relaxation and the grounding can be really, really helpful for that. Share that with your clients in terms of them giving them strategies to use while they are on their own dealing with these intense emotions as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, which actually kind of ties into the next question that I have, which is for frontline social workers where things are changing daily, we're also watching our fellow social workers who are also feeling this increased stress. And one of the comments even from another person was, I'm feeling like I'm making smaller mistakes because I'm busy and I'm running around a lot and I'm not like as focused. And so as social workers, we're one, trying to address the fact that our own needs are not necessarily being met. And two, that a lot of the times, not only our clients, but our colleagues are also struggling. Can you speak to how to best support peers while supporting yourself?
Yeah, this is where if we have anybody who's in leadership or management, if there's the ability to create space for peer support during these periods of time. So I mentioned in Caring Safely that I increased our live sessions. I think we've had 7 in the last week and a half because I know the protective factor that connecting with your peers provides. When I sort of talk from a cognitive behavioral perspective, I talk about the evidence bank. You know, when we look at things from an objective perspective, we can find evidence that supports or does not support our thinking patterns. We don't have evidence on how this situation is being handled and what we are doing. And so some of the most helpful things is to be able to connect with our peers and say, this is what's coming up. This is how I dealt with it. And then they say, oh, I had something similar to that, or I tried this. And so trying to get that support from our peers. So there's a difference between connecting with our peers and talking about the unpleasant things that are happening and what's negative. We do need to validate and identify the struggles. We also need to make sure that we finish that with something that is solution focused. With what am I going to try? What am I going to focus on? Where's the resiliency that I'm seeing? What are the strengths that I'm seeing and can pull on? And so whether this happens in a large format online, so I mean, Zoom, Google Hangouts, whatever the platform is, if there can be large peer groups, at minimum, having a buddy system where somebody from work is connected with another person and you just talk on the phone to even just be able to talk on the phone with each other. And on a more frequent basis right now because of how much change is happening. And because we don't have that ability to pop into our coworker's office and just sort of say the few things that we might say if we were face to face. That really helps us manage our compassion fatigue on a regular basis. We can't pop out into the living room and say that same thing to our spouse. And so we need to have that community connection, whether it's online or through the phone, in whatever formats can happen. It's going to be really important to have that option for people.
Yeah, I think that point of even if you can just have a buddy system is really important for sure. So it's a little bit specific, but the concept is very, very general and something that I'm seeing from a lot of our individuals and attendees who are attending today is, having young children right now in the home. So if you are at home, you have young children at the home, they're very loud and maybe not respectful of your boundaries and not respectful of your private workspace. And so now one of our members is starting to offer sessions around 9 p.m. because that's like after the bedtime when they're able. So they're wondering, is this appropriate? Is it ethical? Are other people doing things like this? What can I do?
Yeah, so this is going to depend on, I guess, the type of work that you are doing. Private practice, we have a lot more leeway than potentially in public service organizations. If the sort of request is coming from people that they have different time options, then it's more about what you I would think, ethically feel okay with? Do you feel like by 9 o'clock, are you adjusting your day so that you have good energy at 9? I know if I tried to do a session at 9, I'm mumbling and not making sense with a lot of my words. But if this is something that you can adapt your schedule, I've done the flip side where I've had a 6 a.m. appointment. But for me, I'm very much a morning person, wake up at 5, 6 to 9 is a fantastic time for me in terms of productivity. I'm okay with that. Having boundaries in terms of sort of the length of the session, keeping the sessions, structured that way. I think if it's private practice or if it's within the organizational mandate, so definitely checking with sort of supervisors around this and leadership. I don't think that there's anything wrong with having that flexibility, but checking in on your wellness, also checking in on them. How are they doing at 9 p.m. or 6 a.m. and addressing some of the parameters for setting up those sessions and afterwards. And so recognizing, if addictions are an issue, or, is 9 p.m. going to be after somebody's had 3 glasses of wine for dinner, right? So some of those things that we wouldn't necessarily think about when it's from home and when it's online, people don't necessarily approach it the exact same way they do when they're going somewhere face to face. And so being clear about those boundaries, I don't think that there's anything wrong with it if we take in those factors. But again, we would really need to take care of ourselves throughout that kind of process, because that can start getting into other habits that make it not sustainable for us.
Yeah. And I think that also can be a little bit more of a broader comment, as I'm seeing some more of these questions float in, is trying to be cognizant that you are in a different scenario. So one of the comments someone was saying is, I work with teens, and my teens are feeling a little bit weird about confidentiality with their parents in the house, and wondering if they can hear them, right? And so
exactly. Yeah. So that in terms of sort of safety, bringing in safety to the work that we're doing in our first online sessions, we want to talk to people about confidentiality. So making sure that they have a headset so that they are hearing through the headset and not open through the phone. Sometimes our basic headsets that come in with our phones can often be added to our computers, or people that we're working with are just actually meeting us on Zoom on their phone. So instead of having open audio, making sure that they're only hearing through sort of earbuds. And same with us, we want to make sure that we're hearing through our earbuds. And these are the types of things that we have to say to each other that we're doing. So we have to let people know, nobody, what you're saying is only in my ear. Nobody else is going to hear that. My window isn't open. My neighbors aren't going to hear. In terms of sort of what we are saying, some of our headsets allow us to be a little bit more delete background noise is a really good feature if you've got that, because it can take care of a lot of what's going on in the background. If there is background noise, then addressing that at the beginning. So I had a sudden meeting shift to Zoom when I had a bathroom renovation going on. So just letting people know, you might hear some banging, I'm far enough away, they can't hear anything that I'm saying in here, but you might hear that. So we definitely have to talk about that process a lot more. With a lot of those formats, there's also chat box as well. And so it may be if they have concerns that parents are listening outside the door, there may be a combination of voice and then chatting within that as well. They might want to say a few things through chat. And, the chat features are often a quick way to sort of bounce back and forth, especially if they don't have sort of that microphone and they feel like they need to say things. And again, process, do you want me to respond in chat, or do you want me to respond in voice if they don't have that headset option? But even talking with them about spaces. So I've before, I can't believe I'm saying this, I've gone and had a session in my vehicle because there was a change in the schedule and I didn't feel that I wasn't comfortable enough in the space. And so my vehicle sits right next to my Wi-Fi. So I feel completely comfortable and have access in my vehicle in terms of confidentiality. So we need to get really creative in terms of where we're at, where people can go as well. Do they have an access to somewhere like that as well? I think what's great is that a lot of internet service providers are waiving bandwidth. So if people have to use their mobile device instead of their router, they don't have to worry about that bandwidth going over if they're live streaming a session. So yeah, as creative as we can be, but talking about the process way more than we ever would in face-to-face.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I would just want to make a note for anyone who may have joined us a little bit late that the CSW has offered a peer-to-peer where we have published a peer-to-peer support group on Facebook. So that's a place where you can also have these discussions with your peers. If you're okay with that kind of more open format, then you can have those discussions and talk about what you're doing. I even see someone here saying, there's potential for you maybe to, you know your clients best. Maybe they can play music in the background, or maybe they can do something else. So, feel free to go to our Facebook page and find that. Yeah.
There are a lot of free apps for white noise. So even if a different computer in a different room has white noise on, if it's not as easy in your room if you don't have a good microphone, but to place that outside of the room as well. I mean, I've been in many counseling centers where you can hear what's going on. And so everybody would just have different white noise machines outside of their offices throughout the hall. So a lot of those factors as well can be helpful. Oh, I can see some of the comments now. I'm literally watching this from my vehicle. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. It's our mobile office space.
I love that vehicle point too. I mean, I've had counseling sessions like on a run before, and I've been like, oh, okay. Yeah. All right. So I think we have time for about one more question. So the question would be that I've been offering volunteer hours for frontliners, and I've added about 3 to 5 hours weekly. So that's as much as I can do on my own time. But I'm wondering if anyone else, or for you, Charlene, if you have any kind of comments on offering hours for practice for practitioners, and how maybe to best mitigate working as a practitioner with clients and then working as a practitioner with other mental health professionals.
Okay, so I'm sort of sensing that this is someone who does private practice and a new sort of client group is working with other healthcare providers for likely sort of mental health and support around that. I mean, I think it's so in terms of dual roles, we always have to sort of watch our dual roles. And the thing about working online is, depending on where you're at in your insurance provider, you might be working with people outside of your geographical location, which is good if you live in a small community and you have concerns around dual roles, and good to help people who are in small communities perhaps get connected with people outside of the community to avoid those dual roles. I think that's one of the really good things that's going to come from the amount of online work that's happening, is greater access to resources in smaller and rural communities. So aside from dual role, because we don't want to take a clinical role with, a colleague or with someone who we have that personal relationship with. So aside from that, it's more so, our competency in terms of our ethics. Do we have the competency to do the type of support and work that they are looking for? And if so, in terms of the work that we do, then there's nothing wrong with supporting people in that way. That's different from, you want to make sure that, depending on the reason they come and see you, that they're not looking for supervision. So this hasn't turned into them looking for support on their clinical work, which is a very different role and responsibility for you as a practitioner, as opposed to helping them as an individual. So just making sure that there's a lot of clarity around what the role is, the services that you provide, and what it isn't, and looking for potential, or maybe have other resources for people who are looking for some of that supervision. I don't do clinical supervision at this point. I do consultation with people, and I've had people ask, are you available for consultation? I've had university students ask it. For me, that's a dual role. I won't do that in terms of that work. So it's always really sort of checking in on what we do, how we're doing it, how we're labeling it, and then keeping those boundaries pretty strong.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I would like to just, as I'm seeing these comments come in, we're not superheroes in the end, and we can't do everything, and we also can't pour from an empty cup. So if you can't keep up with all of your colleagues' needs and whatnot. It's okay to be able to say that, and to be able to address, our clients' needs and our own needs as well. And just be cognizant of that. I'm going to give you, Charlene, do you have a couple final words, and then I'm gonna wrap it up.
My final words would have been your final words. One of the greatest things I struggle with is this representation of social workers or other healthcare providers as superwoman or superman. I so much focus on sustainable caring as a concept, and this is a marathon, not a sprint. We need to be able to be taking care of ourselves all along the way as much as we can, and so that we can be there for the long term, because we still have, there's this period of time, and then there's getting back to the way that we used to practice. And we have no idea what the future is going to hold in terms of how long we can go back, how often we can go back, what we're going to encounter when we go back. Do we get to stay back? Will there be other changes and limits again? So this is very much the mind frame of long-term strategies for managing change. So yes, we definitely are not superheroes in this. We also need care, and just recognizing that, again, it's collective trauma, collective grief. It means we are experiencing the same things that other people are experiencing. And there are going to be losses that happen for some of us, and there might be multiple losses, and we might need to step away from our work if we need our own time to heal. And so recognizing and honoring that as well throughout this process. And, hopefully organizations are looking at, those types of supports and putting plans in place for managing if somebody needs a period of time away for their own physical health, their own mental health.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I know that we wanted to cover a lot. We did cover a lot. And of course, there's a lot left to come. So one of the things I would recommend for anyone that just tuned in, who's wondering why they got the end of this presentation, thinking that they were going to log in an hour later and it'd be done. Sorry about that. We went a little bit over 2 p.m. So you can just refresh the page as soon as I end the webcast, and it'll start over for you, for anyone asking that. Charlene has other webinars on our webpage. I did push to a couple of them, but you can just type in her name and find some of the other webinars that she's done. I know a lot of you were interested, as well as the link to her books, et cetera, et cetera. She also has very kindly in the speaker bio provided the links to the website and to her email and whatever else. So please feel free to check that out before you leave today as well. I did want to quickly note that we do have the Facebook Social Work Peer-to-Peer group, and we are doing webinars. We've kicked it up a lot more, so we're hoping to engage everyone and still provide these online supports, but we're here if you need us in any other way as well. I'm hearing some people about, can we share the presentation and presentation slides? They are normally offered for CISW members, but we have opened all of our webinars up until probably the end of April. I think April 24th was the idea we had. So please feel free to share them. And also engage with us and provide us your feedback and what you need from us. We are responding rapidly to the changing environments, but we are still here and we are still seeing your comments and questions. And so even if you don't get a response from us, we do read what you're saying and appreciate the incredible work of social workers, of course, across this country. So with that, we are about 10 minutes over. I'm going to end the webcast. This doesn't have to be the end of your time with us. You can go to our website, our Facebook, our Twitter. You can email. Thank you for being here. And thank you to Charlene. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you next time, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.